seeing all of you, your ambitions, your hopes for the future, and hopefully being able to share some of our experiences and thoughts with you. So I am delighted to be here, and as Dr. Beatty mentioned, we will be together for 3 weeks, this afternoon and then the following 2 Thursdays. I do want to apologize, I started getting a cold yesterday night. I'm not sure if it's actually a cold or allergies, but I sound quite, hoarse. So I just apologize for that, but I will do my best. Also, my classes tend to be very interactive, so I will be asking questions. We will work on multiple activities together throughout the afternoon. I expect you to participate, engage. There is no wrong answer here. Let's make this, a lively, informative discussion this afternoon, because you don't want just to listen to me lecture for 3 hours, and I want to put you through that kind of torture. So with that said, any thoughts, any questions before we get started? Okay, so let me start by asking you, why are we discussing strategic planning? What is strategic planning? How many in the class here, how many of you have heard the term strategic planning or strategic management? Okay, maybe about 1/3. So what have you heard about strategic planning? What comes to mind when you hear the term strategic planning or strategic management?
Okay.
Yes.
I immediately think about the future.
You think about the future. How do we prepare for the future and position, our organization or our community for to thrive? Because we don't want just to survive, right? We want to thrive in the future. So that's an important distinction between surviving and thriving. Exactly. So positioning for the future. What else comes to mind when you hear the term strategic planning? Goals, objectives, maybe, mission, vision. Okay, so we're going to discuss all of that this afternoon. So this slide is just to get us started. There are 2 characters on this slide. Alice is one character, and the cat is the other character. So just take one moment, please, and look at this slide for me. So, and I apologize, I don't know all of your names, so I'm just gonna point at people. So I'm gonna ask, actually I know Brandon, I'm gonna ask Brandon and Heather. Wow, I know, more than I thought. I'm gonna ask Heather and Brandon. Heather is gonna be the cat, and no, Brandon is gonna be the cat, Heather is gonna be Alice. So Alice, I guess if you can read that first line for us.
Okay. Triceratops, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here?
That depends a good deal on where you want to get to.
I don't much care where,
Then it doesn't matter much which way you go.
so long as I get somewhere.
Oh, you're sure to do that.
Okay. So this is from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So what's the point behind this slide? What message are we trying to convey here?
If you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going to end up.
Did you guys hear that? Okay, you want to repeat that, please?
I said, if you don't have a plan, then you don't know where you're going to end up.
Exactly, you'll end up somewhere,
But you don't know where.
but God knows where, right? You may end up in my house, and I'll say, no, out. you have a plan, you need a plan to help you get to where you need to be. And this is true for us as individuals, right? This is true for organizations in different industries. This is true for communities. This is true for nations. Okay? So strategic planning is as important for individuals and health organizations as it is important for communities and populations. Of course, strategic planning occurs at different levels using slightly different approaches, but it's important really for individuals, organizations, and populations alike. So our learning objectives then for this afternoon are to describe elements of the strategic management process. So we will identify the 4 key components of the strategic management process and spend quite a bit of time discussing each component or each phase of the strategic management process. We will also analyze why strategic planning sometimes fails and how we can ensure that our strategic planning efforts are successful, and then conclude by aligning the elements of strategic management with the core functions of public health. At any point, during my presentation, please feel free to stop me, raise your hand if there's something that you don't understand, or if I'm going, too quickly or too slowly, please let me know. I would appreciate, the feedback. When I started teaching strategic planning, probably I would say over a decade ago, my public health students would always ask me, well, isn't strategic planning really more for the private sector? Okay. Yes, car manufacturers engage in strategic planning. Private healthcare systems engage in strategic planning. But why and how is strategic planning important for public health agencies, for example, that are not profit-driven, that are in the public sector? Yes.
Well, they're still limited by funds.
They're still
And
limited by funds.
They still have a vision and a mission that they have to accomplish.
Exactly. So all organizations, including public health agencies, are still limited. They don't have infinite resources, so they have to utilize those resources wisely. And strategic planning is one approach to facilitating the wise utilization of resources. Also, they do have a mission and vision, so they need a plan for how to accomplish their mission and vision. And so this quote is actually from a document titled Developing a Local Health Department Strategic Plan, and it illustrates how important strategic planning is to public health agencies. A strategic plan is so fundamental to effective management, it says, that it is one of 3 prerequisites for local health departments seeking accreditation through the Public Health Accreditation Board. So, as you may have heard, or as you will hear in this class, different health organizations are accredited by different agencies. So, hospitals and healthcare systems, for example, are accredited by the Joint Commission, whereas public health agencies, local and state health departments, are accredited by FAB, the Public Health Accreditation Board. And FAB emphasizes the importance of strategic planning for the accreditation of health departments, because it is such, again, a key component of effective management and leadership. So again, I just want to establish that strategic planning is really critical for public health agencies, as well as for hospitals, healthcare systems, nursing homes, and other types of healthcare organizations. So our first learning objective was to identify and discuss the 4 key components or phases of the strategic management process. So what you have on this slide is a depiction of those 4 phases. And again, most of our time this afternoon will be diving into each of those phases and discussing what that phase is about and sharing examples and doing some activities together. But every strategic management process, every strategic plan, and let me ask you this, typically, what's the shelf life of a strategic plan? A strategic plan covers what? 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 3 years?
5 years.
5 years is typical, and we are increasingly seeing 3-year strategic plans. Why do you think the time frame has gotten shorter?
The environment's changing a little faster.
The environment is changing very quickly, exactly. So we're having to conduct this situational analysis, the environmental scan more frequently, and update our strategic plans more regularly for them to continue to be relevant to our organization. So again, when I was in school, when I was, doing my master's and my doctoral degree, 10-year strategic plans, 5-year strategic plans were very common. 5-year strategic plans continue to be very common, but again, increasingly now we are seeing 3-year strategic plans. So any strategic planning process, whether it is to produce a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, should always start with what we call a situational analysis. And there are different terms for each of those phases. So depending on what textbook you're looking at or what discipline you're looking at, the situational analysis may be called an environmental scan, okay? Or may be called an assessment of the internal and the external environment of the organization. All of those terms refer to the same thing. But the situational analysis basically, and again we'll discuss it in depth, is a scan and analysis of the internal environment of the organization, its strengths and weaknesses, and of the external environment in which the organization operates, including opportunities and threats. The situational analysis starts with developing or revalidating the organization's mission, vision, and core values, which we'll also talk about in a second. Following the situational analysis phase, the organization proceeds into the second phase, which is the strategy development. Here, the organization identifies its strategic priorities, and for each strategic priority, we develop goals and objectives. The third phase is what's called action planning. This is where we develop the implementation plan. So for each objective, the organization will operationalize that objective by identifying the specific actions that should be implemented to achieve that objective, the person responsible for each action, the resources required to implement that action, the time frame during which the action should occur. And then the final phase of the strategic planning cycle is strategic evaluation and control. This is also known as progress reporting. So this is where regularly, every 6 months or every year, we report on our progress as an organization in achieving the objectives that were defined in the previous steps. Okay? So again, this is just a very, very quick overview, and we will dive into each one of those phases. Before we jump into situational analysis, is there something wrong with this slide or with the way those phases of the strategic management process are presented? Yes.
Well, it's a linear process, and usually in the book it said it was more cyclical.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what is the secret? How's Dr. Beatty making you read the book? That's very impressive. So exactly. So I'm presenting them here just for ease of presentation as a linear, but towards the end of the presentation, we will show them as a cycle. What does cyclical mean? Where are we missing an arrow here to make this cyclical?
After strategic evaluation, you go back up to another analysis and development.
Can you please say that again? Just
After the very last one, so after your evaluation, to go back and reform it, and evaluate it again, go back and reform it.
exactly. So the findings of the evaluation and control phase, those findings should become inputs, okay, should inform our next situational analysis and our next strategic plan, okay? So we really need an arrow that goes from this evaluation and control phase back into the situational analysis phase. Okay? Great, thank you. Okay, so the situational analysis, again, the first phase of the strategic planning cycle. Itself, the situational analysis can be broken into two sub-phases or two steps. The first step is developing or revalidating the organization's mission, vision, and core values. So if this is a new organization, we have to develop the mission statement, the vision statement, and the core values. If this is not a new organization, we have to revisit them, revalidate them, or revise them as needed at the start of each strategic management cycle. So I will give you an example. When I joined our College of Public Health back in 2007, okay, we were just developing as a school of public health, okay? And I facilitated the development of our first strategic plan. As a new school of public health, one of the first things that we did was develop our mission, vision, and core values. Those did not exist, okay? 5 years later, when we were developing our second strategic plan, the strategic plan that we're currently operating under, we revisited our mission, vision, and core values that we had developed 5 years earlier. We actually updated our mission and vision statements, and we kept our core values exactly the way they were. We felt collectively, faculty, staff, students, and other stakeholders, that the core values had served us well, so we left them untouched. But we did update our mission and vision statements. Now you will hear me say a lot today, we, and I just said faculty, staff, students, alumni, and other stakeholders. And this is intentional. Strategic planning is not something that a healthcare executive or a public health director or an associate dean sits in his or her office and completes on their computer and then asks the people of the organization to implement. Strategic planning should be a collaborative process that involves the different, stakeholders. What will happen if I just sit in my office with a cup of coffee and draft a strategic plan, and then come to a college meeting and say, folks, this is what we're gonna do, go do it? What do you think will happen?
No compliance.
I'm sorry?
No compliance.
No compliance, okay? It's unlikely that people will follow, the strategic plan. Why is that?
Probably they don't feel connected to the process. They don't feel the connection.
Exactly. They don't feel connected to the process. They were not involved in the process of developing a strategic plan. Okay. What do we gain by involving the different stakeholders? The employees, the patients, in our case, the students, the alumni. What do we gain by involving them? It does make the process lengthier, right? And perhaps less efficient time-wise and more costly. So what's the benefit of involving them? Yes.
There will be shared understanding of what we want to achieve.
There will be shared understanding of what we want to achieve. I'm not sure I need to be teaching this stuff to you guys. You know it. Well, maybe we should call it a day. I'll go back to my office and you'll go enjoy the sun outside. Excellent. So involving everyone in the process from day one is very important to develop shared understanding and buy-in. Okay, so what are mission, vision, and core values? I believe that last week, when you guys were discussing coalitions and partnerships, you talked about mission, vision, and core values, right? Okay, so because of that, I'm just gonna go over these very quickly. So the organizational mission states the distinctive purpose of the organization, and notice I highlight the keywords, describes what the organization does and for whom. In other words, the organizational mission states who we are, what we are, why we exist, and who's our constituency. So it's important that the mission contains two elements, highlighting first the distinctiveness of the organization, and second, the expectations of shareholders. So again, when we think mission, think a statement describing the purpose of the organization. Why does the organization exist? So let's look at a couple of examples, and you tell me if you think they're good or not so good mission statements. The first one is NASA's mission, to explore the universe and search for life and to inspire the next generation of explorers. What do you guys think of this? Who would say this is a good mission statement for this organization? Let me see your hands. Everyone is undecided at this point. We have a lot of work to do, Sylvester.
Yes.
No points deducted. Who thinks this is a good mission statement for NASA? Okay, everyone who thinks this is not a good mission statement? Okay. Why so? Why so? Come on.
I think it's not specific.
It's not specific, okay?
Doesn't tell you who they are and what they do.
It doesn't tell you who they are or what they do.
What specifically they do.
Okay. Other thoughts about it? Go ahead.
Well, it's not very distinctive.
Mhm.
There are a lot of other people doing the same thing with technology that's just as good. They also do a lot more than that too now. They're involved a lot with just geological sciences and monitoring, so it doesn't seem to be really applicable to today. Maybe in the 70s, but not today.
So maybe it needs updating,
Yeah.
okay? Okay, well, if we think this one is not specific, wait until you see this one. Walt Disney's mission, to make people happy. Walt Disney Parks, you know, Orlando, Florida, California, Paris, right? Everyone knows what I'm talking about? Magic Kingdom, the princesses, to make people happy. What do you guys think about this mission statement? Now, keep in mind, mission statements also need to be brief, right? When you want everyone in your organization and outside your organization to remember them. So there's in a way a balance between brevity and specificity that we need to achieve. Okay? So it's interesting, right? The ranges of mission statements that are there. You go from this, for example, to our college mission statement. Now, of course, we're in academia. Academicians struggle to be brief, right? I personally think this is too long of a mission statement, but it has really 3 or 4 bullets addressing our teaching mission, our research mission, and our service mission. So this first statement is our teaching mission. The second statement is our research mission. The fourth statement is our service mission. And the third statement is something that we added recently, again, when we were doing our second strategic plan, something that is quite unique to our school, to create an environment that is personally and professionally rewarding for faculty, staff, and students. This is not something that you would find in a mission statement of a typical school of public health. But we felt that our people are the most important, and unlike organizations that are only focused on productivity and professional rewards, that it's important to have a balance between personal and professional. And this was so important to us that we actually included it in our mission statement. So what do you guys think about this? And I was not the one who drafted this, by the way. Again, we do all of this. We have meetings like this. We bring faculty, staff, students. We have clickers. We try different statements. We vote on them. We edit, etc. So you won't hurt my feelings if you say you hate this. Because this wasn't me. But what do you think?
I do agree with you. It is a little lengthy, but I do think it's important that you do highlight the key areas of what public health and what you're trying to achieve, like the research, the students. So I get where you're going with it,
But no one will remember this, right?
it'd be kind of hard.
So you see, that's the balance that I was talking about between brevity and specificity. Okay, so vision. So unlike mission, which describes the purpose of the organization, vision is really more futuristic. Vision is about what the organization wants to achieve, okay? Where the organization sees itself or its community in the next 5, 10, or 20 years down the road. So really vision should be motivational and inspirational and should provide hope for the future. And I like this quote, it is vision and the leaders who can articulate that vision that helps people accept uncertainty. Vision substitutes for fear and gives people the confidence to say, I have a dream and I want to be part of it. Core values. Core values are guiding principles. They represent the philosophy or the soul of the organization. They set the ethical tone for the organization. Can you think of examples of core values?
Reliability.
I'm sorry?
Reliability.
Reliability, okay.
Excellence.
Excellence, commitment to excellence in everything that we do. I'm sorry. Yes, I had.
Integrity.
Integrity or honesty in our relationships and dealings. Yes.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh,
Second.
sorry.
Transparency.
Transparency, again, along the same lines as integrity. Other core values, commitment to usually something, right? To excellence, to integrity, to teamwork. Okay. Again, I'll show you briefly the core values of our college. Altruism, service, dignity, diversity, excellence, integrity, and teamwork. And again, those have been our core values since our initial inception as a college back in 2007. So let's do this activity together then. So I'm gonna pass around this handout, and we can do those in the back half, and this is here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can work with your neighbor, that's okay. Okay, fine. So what you have on this flyer, every row that you see is actually either the mission, the vision, or the core values of an actual organization. So those are not fictitious mission, vision statements. Okay? So your charge is in the second column of the table to indicate whether you believe that statement is a mission statement, a vision statement, or a statement of core values. And then in the second column to indicate the type of organization that you believe this statement belongs to. And the types of organizations are listed on the top of the page. So is this a public health agency? Is it a hospital or a healthcare system? Is it a voluntary, meaning non-profit organization? Or is it a behavioral-mental health care provider? Okay? So why don't we take a couple minutes? Again, you can work independently or with your neighbor and see if we can figure this out.
There's no way. But the first there's no way that it
That's what they should correct, yeah.
That's true.
Improve, I thought probably. Second one, yeah.
This was, sorry.
Oh man, they're leaving.
Okay, one more minute. Yeah.
To me.
Gotta keep moving.
I was looking at these and I was like, oh, there's multiple things. Y'all both asked me questions at the same time.
Sorry.
Okay, next one's vision. Next two are done.
No, they gotta keep it. They gotta keep it. For their benefit.
Okay, folks. If are we almost finished? Okay, so we're actually gonna start in the back here. So it's okay to turn your seats around. And if I can have your attention, so we start with the first statement. So what did you think? What was that statement? So that's a mission statement. Was is that what everyone got? Okay. And what type of organization? What did other things? What type of organization? hospital health system, okay? I mean, I can see why you thought public health agency because it talks about communities and health, right?
Yeah.
But it also talks about health care, okay? So health care services or medical care services are really gonna be provided more by a hospital or a healthcare system than a public health agency. Public health agency is gonna focus more on community-based or population-wide services. But the fact that this refers specifically to health care services, which I think at the individual level is an indication that this is a hospital or healthcare system. So this is actually the mission statement of Mountain States Health Alliance. Mountain States Health Alliance was the largest healthcare system in our region, and recently they've become larger. Recently they have merged with Wellmont Health System to create Valid Health. Okay, the next statement, please. You put vision, okay? That's accurate. Why?
It seems more like an overall.
Yeah. Which word in that statement, which verb gives you an indication that it is futuristic? Pursue and create, right? Pursue as that something that we're going to do. Again, for what type of organization? Again, it does end at the end healthcare system to create a world-class healthcare system. So again, that's the vision statement of Mountain States Health Alliance. The next one, sir, please.
I said values.
Values. What type of organization? Yeah, that's harder to tell, but again, that's the core values of Mountain States Health Alliance, which is the healthcare system. Folks, if you can please hear each other, that would help. So if we can lower the volume. Every person a healthy person.
I thought that was a vision statement.
That's the vision statement, yes? What did others think? I'm sorry? Public health agency, why?
It's usually public.
It's about every person in our community. Broad, okay? Yeah, so that's actually the vision statement of Knox County Health Department, which is the local health department in the Knoxville area, about a couple hours from here. So yeah, that's a local public health agency.
So guys, if you could speak a bit louder for the sake of this vote, that would be helpful.
Okay, we will speak louder, thank you, Celeste. Okay, the next one, protect, promote, and improve the health of people in Tennessee.
No.
So,
Mission or vision? Mission. Okay, she's saying vision, what do others think?
mission.
Mission? Okay, so we exist to protect, promote, and improve the health of people in Tennessee. So that's the mission of which agency you think?
Tennessee.
The Tennessee Department of Health. Exactly. So that's the mission of the Tennessee Department of Health. Thank you. Next one. To encourage, promote, and assure the development of healthy community through innovative public health practices.
said vision.
Vision or mission? Mission. Again, we exist to encourage and promote healthy communities. And what type of agency? Public health agency, exactly. So that's again the mission statement of Knox County Health Department. So their mission is to encourage, promote healthy communities, and their vision is every person a healthy person. So through their actions, their goal is, their aim is for every person in Knox County to become a healthy person. Okay, next one, please. Those are core values. What type of agency? Public health agency. Again, those are the core values of Knox County Health Department. Please. That's a vision. How do we know? With B is the future. What type of agency? Public health agency. The Public Health Agency. So that's actually Northern Kentucky Public Health Department. Okay, very good. Next one, please.
I think it's a vision.
It's a vision. Why so?
Because it's saying like it is focusing on longer and easier lives and changing policies. So it might be a vision. And I think government would be able to provide
Yeah, so this is the vision statement actually of Washington State Health Department, which is another state health agency. You notice that, you know, as a state health agency, you're really involved in policy development, in the systems, in environmental control, injury prevention, community health, behavioral health. So all of those indicate that this is a vision. Our vision is that people in Washington State will enjoy longer and healthier lives. The next one, please.
I said mission.
So let me try to reword this. So does it make sense to say our mission is to be the healthiest state in the nation?
In terms of like this context, vision would fit better, but yeah.
So vision would fit better. Our vision is to be the healthiest state in the nation. Okay? Vision. And what type of organization is this?
It's probably like the State Department of Health, so public health.
Exactly, healthiest state.
Yeah.
So it's a state, it has to be a state health agency. So this is actually the vision statement of the Florida Department of Health. Thank you. The next one, please.
I said that it was a mission statement. Probably for some kind of cancer organization.
Exactly. So this is the mission statement of the American Cancer Society. The American Cancer Society is the nationwide organization dedicated to, so it's again describing the purpose of the organization, why they exist.
I guess I'm just confused because like we keep like differentiating mission and vision, but then like with vision it's supposed to be like futuristic and inspirational and how the mission will be achieved, and then this says like we want to achieve this by preventing cancer and doing all this stuff, and I just don't understand like how you can differentiate that. Like I'm just having a hard time because both of those things sound the same to me.
Yeah, it's sometimes, you know, tricky. That's an excellent point. But the vision of the American Cancer Society would be something like communities free of cancer.
Okay.
That would be more like their vision.
And see, like that sounds more like a mission to me, so I'm just like having like a really hard time understanding how we got there.
Their mission is why they exist. They exist in order to eliminate cancer and achieve communities free of cancer. Okay. So So what you want to achieve is your vision. Okay, the next one, please.
I thought it was a mission statement.
It's the mission statement. Again, we exist to prevent and cure diabetes. What type of organization?
Hospital and health system.
It's specific to diabetes, right? A hospital or a health system is not gonna have a mission specific to one disease or one condition, right? Because they're gonna need everything typically except their specialty hospital. So what's this one? Prevent and cure diabetes. This is the mission of the American Diabetes Association. A voluntary organization.
I was going off the web here.
Supporting research
So these last two are voluntary?
Yes, American Cancer Society and American Diabetes Association. The next one, please.
Okay, we will deliver the best healthcare anywhere would be vision.
Would be vision. Again, and that verb, we will, gives it away.
Futuristic.
Because it's for the future. We will deliver the best healthcare anywhere. What type of organization?
Healthcare system or hospital?
Healthcare system or hospital. Again, you see healthcare there. This was the vision of Wellmont Health System until they merged with Mountain State Health Alliance. The next one, please.
I think is a mission for behavioral organization.
So this is Frontier Health, which is a behavioral organization. And the last one.
Wait, this was a mission?
This is actually their vision statement. It is futuristic to be a And the last one. So to improve the quality of life through the blending of primary care, behavioral health and prevention services.
I would think healthcare system because it's behavioral, but it's blending it with it.
Yeah, so this is actually the mission statement of Cherokee Health System, which is a behavioral health care organization in the Knoxville area.
See, what I, okay, on that one, it's wanting to improve, so that would seem like futuristic to me also. So it's just a lot of gray area pretty much.
There is some grayness there, yeah.
Because then also it'll probably like how they want to do it by building
Yeah. I mean, I literally wrote down vision for mission,
Yeah.
because I can see how it can be better.
Their vision would be again something like to see their community perhaps free of behavioral health problems. But again, this is not, I mean, you're not going to get this, you're not gonna be tested on this. This is not something that you're gonna be tested on. This is just to give you a feel for what those mission and vision statements look like for different types of organizations. Okay. And to get us going. Okay. So back to the situational analysis. Again, to reframe where we are. Situational analysis starts by developing the mission, vision, and value statements for a new organization, or revalidating / revising those statements for an existing organization. But that's important. I mean, we can't plan really until we agree as an organization who we are, why we exist, what we want to achieve, and what's our philosophy. Once that's accomplished, we move into the second phase of the situational analysis, which involves the situational assessment of the external and the internal environment. So this is again sometimes called environmental scan. But this is where the organization the strategic planning team looks both internally to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, as well as externally to identify opportunities and threats over the next few years in the environment. So this is where sort of like they're doing their homework. They're trying to find out what's happening around us, what's happening internally, what do we need to be aware of to be prepared for the future. So again, situational assessment involves both assessing the external environment in which the organization operates, as well as the organization's internal environment. The purpose of the situational assessment is to determine which factors internally and externally are subject to the organization's control and how the organization will be affected by external forces in the future. So when we're conducting the external assessment, this actually can be a major undertaking. Why? Because healthcare and public health organizations operate in very complex environments, and there are a wide range of stakeholders or players that can impact the operations of healthcare and public health organizations. So the external assessment is not something that your planning team is going to do in one day or in 1 week. I mean, this is something that is going to take, again, a significant amount of time and effort because you have to examine different sectors, identify the trends in each of those sectors, and begin to determine what are the opportunities and the threats that those different sectors will present to your organization. So in healthcare and public health, we have regulators and accreditors. The Public Health Accreditation Board, again, accredits public health agencies. CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which regulates 2 large health insurance programs in our nation, Medicare and Medicaid. HHS is the Department of Health and Human Services. The Joint Commission accredits hospitals and healthcare systems. So we need to be very, very aware of those accreditation criteria and regulations. Why? Because it has a significant impact on our operations. Okay. CEEF, the Council on Education for Public Health, accredits schools of public health across our nation. So our accrediting agency is CEEF. Okay? CEEF in late 2006 did a major revision of their criteria. Okay? Regardless of whether a school was accredited, was in the midst of an accreditation cycle or not, all schools have to come into compliance with those new accreditation criteria by 2018. So we have been working around the clock, to bring our school and all of our programs into compliance with those new accreditation criteria. Okay? So again, it's important. We knew that they were coming because we were monitoring our external environment, and we knew that our accrediting agency was working on a major revision to the accreditation criteria. That was not a surprise to us, but the timeline that they imposed on us was a surprise. We thought that they would give us more than 2 years to come into compliance with all the new criteria. So again, keeping an eye on your accrediting agency, your regulators, what they have in the pipeline, what they're planning. Providers, again, they include public health agencies, hospitals. Those are our competitors, right? We need to know what they're doing, what they're planning. We always keep an eye on other schools of public health, universities, programs. Okay, what are the trends? What are they planning? Certificates, programs, online, on ground, hybrid. Okay, so we know exactly what's happening in our environment. Resources are important for every organization. So we need to assess workforce supply, technology, data, funding, and trends in other resources. We also need to have a good relationship and understanding of our professional association. And in public health and healthcare, there's a wide a range of professional associations. American Medical Association, American Hospital Association, American Health Insurance Association, and so on. Because again, their positions, their policy statements, their advocacy efforts can affect our organization. Importantly, we need to monitor our customers. Okay? For our case, as a School of Public Health, our primary customer is who? Students. Okay? So we need to have a good understanding of what students want and need in terms of academic programs. Who's another important customer for us?
Teachers.
Teachers. Who else?
Public community.
The communities that we serve.
Public health agencies.
Public health agencies, they tend to employ our graduates. So employers, we're always talking with potential employers of our graduates, whether it's public health agencies or hospitals or healthcare systems or what have you, to know what they want, what kinds of competencies, what knowledge, what skills they're expecting our graduates to have. Okay? Payers, again, in public health, healthcare, those are the different health insurance programs and community partners. So as you can see, there are many, many different players and stakeholders, and the external environmental assessment should be comprehensive and document trends, opportunities, and threats in each of those sectors. Ultimately, the external environment of a health organization, we can think about it in terms of the micro or health environment as well as the macro environment. So health organizations do not exist in vacuum. They are affected by the health environment. So this includes policies, regulations related to healthcare delivery, things like insurance trends, reimbursement for healthcare services, healthcare technology, healthcare data. But health organizations are also part of the larger environment, so they are affected by trends in the economy, political changes, global efforts, and other, again, factors in the macro environment. The more comprehensive our external assessment is, the better. Okay? Because again, we need to understand where we are relative to what's happening around us. The other part of the assessment, the environmental assessment, is the internal assessment. So this is where we take a look again inside the walls of the organization. And I'm very reluctant now to say walls because a lot of organizations now are really virtuous. They don't have walls. But take a look inside our organization to identify our strengths and our weaknesses so that we can capitalize on our strengths as part of our strategic plan and know how to address or improve our weaknesses. So this is where we look at things like our human resources. For every organization, the most important asset is our people. Okay? It's not the budget. It's not the building. Okay? The most important asset of every organization is its people. So that's why this is at the very top of the list. We have to look at our human resources. We look at our faculty here, for example. Do we have a strong complement of faculty with the right expertise and qualifications to teach our students and to conduct research that will generate new knowledge in the field? We look at our staff, who support, again, our faculty and students. In healthcare, you're going to look at your physician composition, nursing composition, administration staff, and other types of human resources. Technology is another very important factor in the internal assessment. Do we have the right technologies to achieve our goals? Okay. For healthcare organizations now, electronic health records, for example, is very, very important. Do they have the appropriate electronic health record infrastructure to support the delivery of care. For us, it's more about educational technologies. Are those up to date and support distance learning, for example? We examine our financial health, our income statements, our budgets, revenues, expenses, bottom line, supply chain, data, and organizational culture. All are important factors of the internal assessment. What do we do with all of this data and information that we gather as part of the external and internal assessment? We have to summarize this information in some meaningful fashion. And a common tool that we use to summarize this information is the SWOT analysis. So let me see another show of hands. Who has heard the term SWOT analysis? Very good, more than half of the class. So what's a SWOT analysis? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So now let me be clear, this is not the only tool that is used to summarize the findings of the situational assessment. There are actually many different tools, and they are all very valuable. But because this is just an introductory session today on strategic planning, we cannot cover all of the different tools. So we discuss specifically the SWOT analysis because it is a very common tool for summarizing the findings of the situational assessment. So after we complete the external assessment and the internal assessment, we will end up typically with a long list. But again, we should try to summarize this in one page. Keep in mind that strengths and weaknesses are internal to the organization, whereas opportunities and threats exist in the external environment or in the market in which the organization operates. Okay? And those are important distinctions. So what are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Strengths are those things that our organization does well. Strengths may include our resources, our capabilities that give us a competitive advantage. And strengths can be tangible or intangible. So if we have a solid reputation in our community, for example, that's an intangible strength. Weaknesses are the opposite of strengths, right? To simplify things. They are those things that will prevent the organization from doing what we really need to do. Barriers, so to speak, challenges, obstacles, internally facing our organization. Because they are internal, they are largely under our control. Okay? So again, we should come up for plans to improve on our weaknesses. Opportunities are potential areas for growth and better performance. Again, external in nature. And our strategic plan, if done correctly, should really be an opportunity for us to capitalize and leverage those opportunities to, again, improve our strategic position and thrive in the future. And finally, threats are external challenges facing our organization. And they can be economic threats, political threats, they can be health insurance threats, reimbursement threats. So there's a wide range of threats. So it becomes important that we prioritize them in terms of probabilities and which ones are more likely or less likely to threaten our organization, again, over the next few years. So before we take a break, we're going to do our second activity today. And what I'm passing around now is another handout that has a list of forces or factors that our organization has identified during the assessment phase. And you are serving on the strategic planning team of your organization. And you want to begin your SWOT analysis by identifying whether each of those factors is a strength, weakness, opportunity, or threat facing your organization. Okay? Possibly, there may one or two may be like that, but most of them, they should be clear where they fall. You can just remember strengths and weaknesses are internal to the organization, whereas opportunities and threats exist in the external environment. If you keep that distinction in mind, that will be helpful. So again, let's take a couple minutes. You can work with your neighbor, and let's see if we can categorize those factors. This should be easier than the first activity.
Like I really like had a hard time getting out of the
And I want
Do wasps smoke? No. I wish I didn't work Yeah, like when I was in college,
Some folks are finished. Competition, some folks are finished already.
That's the strength of our group. It's internal.
Okay. Folks, I hate to interrupt your discussions, but we have to stay moving. Unless you wanna stay here till like 6 or 7, I'll stay. I don't think. So, okay, thank you. So let's, go through these, and we'll start in the front now since we started in the back with our first activity. Okay, so, and if someone disagrees with the speaker, let us know, or if someone is not sure, let us know. Okay, so we're gonna start right here. Please read the factor or the force for us, and let us know what you think it is.
Patent that your organization holds. Strength.
So that's the strength. Again, if anyone disagrees, please say so. Otherwise, I'm gonna assume that everyone is on the same page, and we're gonna go through this quickly.
Will you speak up so we can hear you back here?
Speak up, please. Scream like me.
Insufficient organizational resources. Weakness.
Weakness.
Organizational products with strong branding. Strength.
Strength.
Loyal customers. Strength.
Very high quality product. Strength.
Excellent financial condition, strength.
Poor product quality, weakness.
Outdated technologies, weakness.
Emergence of new models of care delivery. I put opportunity and a threat. I don't know. It could be either one.
Why do you think it can be an opportunity or threat? Help us understand.
It would be an opportunity if you utilize it. If not, if other people other organizations are using it and you're not, it's a threat.
Okay, exactly. So what are some of the new models of healthcare delivery that have emerged, I guess, over the past few years? Telemedicine, other examples? Patient-centered medical homes, accountable care organizations. Okay. So again, if you're positioned to take advantage of those, they can be very beneficial to your organization and be an opportunity. If not, they can be a threat. So, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I want to ask for number 3 and 4, that's organizational products with strong brand names. Why can't it be an opportunity? If you have a good product and then it's an opportunity for you to advance your market. And loyal customers, why can't it be an opportunity to expand?
So why do you guys, can someone answer your colleague?
It's an internal.
Loyal customers.
So if you have as an organization loyal customers, if you, our students, become loyal alumni and donate a lot of money for your school after you graduate, which we're hoping you'll do, that's really a strength, right? If there are products emerging in our market that we might be able to use, that's an opportunity. But if those are our own products that have strong brand names, like I used to give Nike as an example, but now people have very different feelings about Nike. So, but Under Armour, Adidas, okay, products with strong brand names, that's a strength, right? We can market them, yes, but really they are our internal products in this case.
High skilled workforce at your organization, that's a strength.
Thank you.
High cost structure of the operations, weakness.
It's a weakness.
Unskilled workforce at the organization, weakness.
Weakness, thank you.
Efficient ways to distribute your health services to rural areas through telemedicine. I think strength.
Strength. Very good. Good. Next one, please.
Strong leadership team, strength.
Strength. Next one.
Solid reputation in the community, opportunities.
So if our organization has a solid reputation in the community, that's a strength, right? Remember we said strengths can be tangible or intangible. So that's an intangible strength. If everyone in our region here respects CTSU, for example, that's a strength because that allows us to attract students. Yeah.
Well, for me, I thought it was an opportunity because it is an excellent perspective of our organization. And that leads me back to what she asked about the loyal customers. The customers can be toxic. They're toxic to us as a threat. I mean, that's my perspective. So how I answered them were that, is this question internal or external? Once I answer that, then I know what it is. So in this case, if we said a reputation, it means an external thing. It is now favorable opportunity.
What do you guys think about that? Let me ask you this, your reputation, is that something that you can control? Yes or no? To a large extent. If it's something that you can control, it's a strength. It's an internal. Threats and opportunities, again, really you have little control over them. They're gonna emerge regardless of what you do. So what you try to do is, again, you try to take advantage of the opportunities and minimize the threats. But really you have no control over them. But I have control over my reputation, right? I mean, I can come here completely unprepared for class, for example, and leave here with all of you thinking, what the heck? Or I can do my homework before coming to class and develop that reputation.
Unhappy patience with your competitor, opportunity.
That's an opportunity, right? If you're unhappy with your competitor, it's an opportunity for you to grab it. Okay?
Government issues an economic stimulus package to support economic growth opportunity.
And this actually happened a few years ago where the government did issue a large economic stimulus package when the economy was in recession in order to help bring the economy back up. Okay, next one please.
Better economic conditions, opportunity.
That's an opportunity.
Creation of health insurance marketplaces, opportunity.
And why is that? Help us understand.
Well, I would think if more people have access to health insurance, they'll get more healthcare.
Exactly, thank you.
So Medicaid expansion in your state to cover more uninsured people would be also an opportunity in the same way that the marketplaces would be.
Exactly. Those are a little trickier. Does everyone understand the rationale that your colleagues are providing? Excellent.
Economic recession, that's a threat.
That's a threat.
Physician shortage, I think that's a threat too.
That's a threat too, because it can affect my ability as a hospital or healthcare system to recruit providers to serve my patients, right? If there's a physician shortage and I'm a hospital in a rural area. Okay? Again, I'm sorry?
I think it will also be an opportunity.
Yes.
As a doctor, if I own a hospital and there are shortages of physicians, people will come to my hospital. So it's an opportunity I could gain from that.
Typically, I mean, the hospital, I see your point, but typically the hospital is not gonna be, owned or operated by just one doctor.
It can be a family physician in that community.
Right, so if it's an individual provider, yes, that can be an opportunity, I agree. But if it's an organization, really, that needs to have a skilled workforce, recruitment and retention in rural areas of providers is a huge issue. But I do agree, if the organization in this case is a single provider practicing in a rural area, that can be an opportunity. Although I would not want to be that physician because they're gonna be really isolated.
It's quite common especially when
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess that's a perspective.
I agree. Yeah.
But here it's more like a group of doctors.
No, I totally understand. Yeah. From an individual perspective, it's an opportunity, I agree. From an organizational perspective, it's a threat. That's an excellent point, thank you. Next one, please.
Shortage of public health nurses. It's a threat.
Again, for an organization, this is a threat, particularly for public health agencies. For an individual nurse, it may be a different story. Next one, please.
Cuts in Medicare reimbursement for healthcare services, a threat?
That's a threat again for healthcare systems because it means lower reimbursement. Okay. Okay, so I think we're at a good place, to get a short break. Okay, so why don't we, stretch our legs and get a drink, and let's please reconvene. In 5 minutes.
Still?
Yes.
Oh, well, she said that you had the same answer.
For which?
That's why I didn't say anything.
No, I last year prevalent. Did you? Yeah.
I was way prevalent.
Oh, I got your 90 classes. Okay, so what is I got a student what do we want to do? Oh, 90. Okay. Okay.
What did you put in that?
Yeah, I said, well, I said like, for the exam.
So right now, yeah, I'm writing another draft. It's the first draft past the
Or at least it wasn't for
so I'm hoping to have it done or start but like maybe a third of like the content done, maybe by the end of this week or next week. It's still like a time on it. They're like pretty much well, they in a lot of ways they are. In a lot of ways, like they are, it's just that they never advance it. They're always like in something else in this section. That's why like they haven't even told me to go on. I'm just like I've got to start going on if I don't. Because in the worst case scenario,
My mom has the Amazon phone. I see her links all day long.
yeah, and I mean maybe he'll give me like an anchor.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I don't know.
My family uses mine.
Student, you can account.
I just let them use it every year. They do a lot for me, so I feel like I should do this for them.
I guess.
I guess.
I don't have any income.
I mean, I do care about the honors.
My Netflix subscription
If I don't.
that parent Netflix messages to live my mom's Amazon line. I use my own Spotify. I pay for my own Spotify. I lost my student Spotify. I should attend this month. I was doing something down Spotify student, I was getting like 5 months free, but yeah. Why? They did that for students. I don't know, but 4 years past. So even though I'm a student and I need it more now than I did then. Oh yeah. They'll be emailing, I'll be like, no way. I tried to renew and they're like, oh, that's a little that was illegal. Sorry, this gets
I guess it's really hard. She tries to put it in, it's like sold out or something. But if she's like,
I would have, I don't know if y'all like ate it.
We did.
I would have stayed. We did. But I was wondering where you were and I had frozen food in the back of my car.
Yeah.
So.
I hate that. It's called
A larva? Oh. Are they chewy or hard?
The
key lime pie.
Wow.
Try it?
Yeah.
The key lime pie.
I don't like it.
Like, smell it.
Yeah. I did. I was like.
And how was that? It smelled like I would want Good texture. Wait, for the epi?
Okay, folks, did everyone get their drink, snack, the fuel that you need? Okay. Because I tell you what, at this point, we have completed the situational analysis, okay? And we're ready to jump into strategy development. So again, at this point, we have developed or revalidated our mission, vision, and value statements. Our strategic planning team has also completed the situational assessment and summarized those findings into a SWOT analysis. So we have quite a bit of information now to guide us in developing our strategy. So what is strategy development? Again, the second phase of the strategic planning cycle is strategy development. This is where we take the information that we collected in the previous phase. We match the strengths to the identified opportunities while addressing our weaknesses and preparing to deal with the external threats. So strategy development, this phase involves developing at least 3 things. We develop our strategic priorities, sometimes called our strategic issues. And then for each strategic priority, we develop one or more broad goals. And for each goal, we develop one or more SMART objectives. Okay? So let's see how that works by taking a quick look at this document. So what you have in front of you is a flyer actually that we call our College of Public Health, the ETSU College of Public Health Strategic Plan 2014-2019 at a glance. So this is really a one-page summary of our 14-19 strategic plan. So is this a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year strategic plan? What is this? This is a 5-year strategic plan, okay? We are in year 4 currently of our strategic plan. So again, this one-page summary shows our mission, vision, and core values, again, because those are the foundation of any strategic plan. And if you look here, how many strategic priority areas did we identify in our strategic plan? 6 strategic priority areas. What are those? Education, research, service and applied public health, diversity, workforce, and resources. Okay? So those are, again, based on our situational assessment, and we spent about a year actually conducting internal and external assessments. We had different work groups focusing on different aspects of the internal and the external environment. And every work group composed of faculty, staff, students, alumni, and other stakeholders produced a report of the findings of their piece of the situational assessment. And then we integrated those reports of the different work groups into one SWOT analysis and one document. Based on that, again, we identified 6 strategic priority areas. And for each strategic priority area, we developed either 1 or 2 goals. Okay, so how many goals do we have for our education priority area? 2 goals. To expand and benchmark educational programs with workforce needs and to continue to attract qualified students. How many goals do we have under our research priority area? 1. Under service and applied public health? 2. Diversity? 1. Workforce? 1. And resources? 1. So we had a total of how many goals? 8 goals. Okay? So again, goals, you're not looking to develop 100 goals. Okay? If you have 100 goals in your strategic plan, you're going to be in trouble. Because goals, again, are meant to be broad statements, okay, related to your strategic priorities. And then for each goal, for each of those 8 goals, we developed SMART objectives. So to emphasize what we just said, goals are those things that must be accomplished for organizational success. They identify key performance areas for each of our strategic priority issues. They should support our mission and vision and describe a future desired outcome. As we discussed at the beginning of class today, there should be broad participation in the development of the goals. So different stakeholders should be involved in this process, again, to facilitate buy-in and shared knowledge as you identified earlier. And they really should drive higher levels of performance. That means that goals should be ambitious okay? They really should help move the organization forward. They should not be about just maintaining the status quo, okay? Because if all the organization does is maintaining its status quo, very soon it's gonna fall behind. Because everyone is gonna be moving forward and we're gonna be staying where we are. So maintaining status quo is not an option. Because that eventually will lead us to become not relevant, will lead to failure. So we have to be moving forward. And that's what those goals are supposed to drive. Now, unlike goals, objectives should be very specific. Okay? So objectives should be SMART, meaning specific, measurable, attainable, relevant to the goal, with a time frame identified for achieving each objective. And we will look at examples. Specific again, measurable, meaning we should be able to collect data about key indicators in every objective and track this data over time to measure the extent to which we are achieving that objective or not. Attainable means they should be ambitious but at the same time realistic, because we don't want to set ourselves up for failure. They should be relevant to the goal, and every objective should indicate its time frame. Are we planning to achieve this objective within 1 year, within 2 years, within 3 years? So the time frame should be specified in the objective. Again, they should compel the organization into action and be acceptable to those who will be executing them. And typically, we have to have several objectives in order to meet our broad goal. Okay? So think about this in terms of a stepwise process. We identify our strategic priorities. For each strategic priority, we identify one or more broad goals, and for each goal, we identify one or more SMART objectives. So let's take a look at a few examples, and you tell me if you think each of those examples is a broad goal or a SMART objective. Okay? So you're gonna scream. I'm gonna read the statement and you're gonna scream. Because you're getting tired, you have to wake up. Okay? So reorganize the entire organization for better responsiveness to customers.
Goals.
Goals. If anyone disagrees, scream higher. Louder. Whoever screams louder wins. No, just kidding. Enhance the physical conditions of our public facilities.
Goals.
Monitor employee morale through annual satisfaction surveys. This is an objective, again, specific to employee morale. Defines what we want to do, satisfaction surveys, defines how frequently we want to do that, annually. Consolidate payable processing through a P-card system over the next 2 years. Objective. Launch at least 3 quality improvement projects over the next 2 years to improve inpatient outcomes. Objective. Partner with key stakeholder organizations to enhance coordination in service delivery. That's a goal. It's not defining which stakeholder organization, it's not defining a time frame. So there's going to be multiple objectives under that goal that more specifically define what organizations we want to partner with in order to improve what aspects of service delivery over what periods of time. Okay? So let me again just show you a couple more examples before we move forward, because I feel like we really learn more when we see examples, right? So let's see if I can exit this and go to our entire strategic plan. So this is our entire strategic planning document, also on our website. When we talk about transparency, we do transparency. All of our data is out there. So again, this starts by describing our mission, vision, core values, and the process that we used to develop the strategic plan. And you can see involvement of faculty, staff, professional advisors, community people, students, etc. Clearly identified in the process. Then here, if we go down, All of the people who participated on the planning work groups are listed. You see here in table 4 our 6 strategic priority areas and the goals for each area. And then you see for each goal, which is in gold, there are multiple objectives in blue. Okay? So this was intentional, we used the university colors, of course. So for our first educational goal, which is expand and benchmark and align our programs with workforce and student needs, you can see we have multiple objectives. The first one is to develop a new program offerings. Okay? And for each objective, we actually have multiple indicators or outcome measures. So we wanted to do a new offering in health management and policy. This has been accomplished. We developed a doctoral program in health management and policy. We wanted to establish an MPH concentration in global health. We have not established an MPH concentration. We determined that it was more feasible to establish a certificate in global health initially and a minor in global health, which we have done. Okay, so let's see more examples here. So again, this is the second goal, for example. Continue to attract qualified students and to provide them with a high quality educational experience. Again, you can see multiple objectives for that goal. The first objective is expand student recruitment efforts to attract a qualified student body. There are multiple indicators under that objective. We track the GRE scores of our applicants. We track the GPAs of our incoming students. Okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about the other stuff under action planning. But it's all very detailed. What are our goals? What are our objectives under each goal? So that's what strategy development is about. Again, 3 main things: strategic priorities, goals, and objectives. Once we have our objectives in place, once we've developed our objectives, now what our strategic planning team will do is they have to develop the action plan or the implementation plan. So for each objective, as part of phase 3 of the strategic planning cycle, for each objective, we develop a supportive action plan that identifies at minimum the specific actions or steps that we will need to implement to achieve that objective, who is responsible for each of those steps, the time frame, and the resources needed to achieve that step. A lot of strategic plans fail because there are no resources identified to achieve the objectives. We develop very nice, ambitious, beautiful objectives, and somehow we think that they're going to take care of themselves. But they're not going to take care of themselves. We have to allocate the necessary resources, people, money, and other resources to implement, again, the actions or the steps that would lead to the achievement of the objectives. So going back to our example here, you can see what our action plan looks like. So for every indicator, let's say for this objective, E2 to deliver high quality educational programs. Our first indicator is the proportion of students who report that their coursework increased their knowledge. Our action plan indicates where we are going to get that data from, the source of data. In this case, it's the SAIs, the Student Assessment of Instruction. Who is responsible for collecting and tracking and analyzing that data? The Dean's Office with the department chairs. How frequently we do this? Every semester. What is our target for our performance indicator? 90%. We want at least 90% of students to report that coursework increased their knowledge. What's our baseline data at the time we developed the plan? 94% in 2010-11, 94% in 2011-2012, 93% in 2012-13. So we can continue to track every year relative to the baseline to see what we are doing. Okay? So this is again how we laid out our action plan for every indicator. The second one, proportion of NPH students who pass the comprehensive exam. Source of data, NPH student spreadsheet, person responsible, NPH coordinator, frequency of monitoring every semester, target for our performance indicator 90%. So again, we track, we can compare our performance to our targets. Are we meeting or exceeding our targets, hopefully? If yes, great. If we're falling short, we can take corrective action immediately. And we did this for every indicator in our strategic plan. Okay, it's all on the website. Same thing for research. Research dollars. Where does that data come from? What's our target? Our target back then was 1.5 million by 2019. Actually, as of 2017-2018, we had, I believe, about 3.25 million in research funding. So we've exceeded our target by 200 to 250%. External grant submissions, because then service is the same way. We have goals, we have objectives for every objective indicators and an action plan. We even went a step further. For each objective, we specified the specific actions that we have to take, okay, to achieve that objective. So you can see also the specific action items listed. So this then becomes a document that is alive. How do we ensure that it's alive? Through strategic implementation and through evaluation and control. So again, the fourth phase of the strategic planning cycle, evaluation and control, is also known as progress reporting. So here where we monitor the implementation of our strategic plan and make adjustments as needed. As I showed you in our strategic plan, we define indicators or outcome measures for each objective. We define the targets for those indicators. And then we regularly collect data and measure our performance, our actual performance relative to the targets. We compare our measurements to the target to see how well we're doing, and we report our progress to all of our stakeholders. So every semester, for example, here we have a college-wide meeting. We just had one last week, I believe, where the dean shares a progress report on how well we are doing relative to the targets in our strategic plan. At the spring college-wide meeting, he presents what we call the State of the College report, just like the State of the Union. It wasn't creative, we just borrowed that. But where he again presents a full progress report. And we make necessary changes. Again, we thought we were going to do an MPH in global health. We realized that was not going to be feasible during this strategic plan. So we identified an alternative, a certificate and a minor. Okay. What are performance targets? For each indicator, we should have at least one target. Targets should reflect higher levels of performance and incremental improvements over time. When you reach or exceed your targets, that means that you have successfully executed your strategy. So let's look at a couple examples from the public healthcare field. I showed you examples from a higher educational institution, but those are examples of targets from, again, public health. So in this case, the organization, one of their indicators is the proportion of their staff who are trained in safety and emergency preparedness. In 2016, 65% of their staff were trained in this area. In 2017, 80%. So their target for this year, for 2018, is 95%. So you can see how their target builds on the increases over the past years. So it reflects incremental improvement. Okay? They increased the percent staff trained by 15 percentage points between 16 and 17. So their target for 2018 reflects another 15 percentage point increase. Now by the end of 2018, they can measure and they can determine, if they have reached their target or not. But unless you have, again, an indicator and a target, you really cannot assess how well you are performing relative to what's in your plan. Yes?
Is it smart though to have goals? Because as you approach 100, it becomes harder and harder to hit that. So wouldn't it be better to go for 65, 80, 90 or something like that?
Yeah, so that's something that's an excellent question, but that's what those planning teams really discuss and determine what is best. I mean, this could very well be a requirement, for example, that all staff, there can be a regulation that all staff must be trained in this area if you're a public health agency. So they may be wanting to get into that 100% to meet that requirement. So some of those are driven by requirements. So I'll give you an example. Our accrediting agency, for example, they say that the minimum graduation rate for master's degree programs is 70%. So every cohort of students that we admit, the minimum acceptable graduation rate is 70%. If we set a target lower than that, for example, then we're not going to meet that accreditation criterion. Okay? So sometimes those targets are at least in part defined by regulation and by accreditation criteria. For MPH programs, the accreditation criterion for job placement, for example, is that at least 80% of MPH graduates should be employed or furthering their education within 1 year of graduation. So that's the national benchmark, 80%. We consistently, year after year after year, we're 90% or higher. So we're always exceeding that, which is great. But again, that minimum really is 80%. Otherwise, we're not in compliance with that. Another example is toxic sites meeting compliance. And again, you can see how they are establishing their 2018 target using this incremental approach. Now, the third indicator, average time to process new employees after hiring, this is an indicator where you want to see a reduction, not an increase, unlike the other indicators. Because you really want to be able to process new employees as quickly as possible. So they're trying to decrease that average time from 40 to 35 days to 30 days. Okay? Questions about indicators, targets? No? Are you sure? Okay. So in summary then, remember at the beginning of class I told you that slide that had the phases in a linear fashion was not very accurate and you appropriately identified that it should be cyclical. So this is, how that cyclical slide looks like. Situational analysis, followed by strategy development, action planning, then evaluation and control. The findings of the evaluation and control phase then informs the next strategic plan. So again, to go back to our example. So when we developed our 2014-19 strategic plan as a college, what were the major inputs, you think, into this plan? what did we feed the plan? What did we fuel it with? What are all of these inputs or factors that went into developing the plan? Think basic. Our mission, vision, values. I'm sorry?
Goals?
The goals are the outputs in a way. That's what we produced. But what went into it?
Education. The situation analysis?
The situational analysis, exactly. The findings from the situational analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The accreditation criteria, obviously, because we have to maintain accreditation. And one important thing that went into the development of our strategic plan are the findings of the previous strategic plan. So the findings from that evaluation and control phase of our previous strategic plan. So if you look on our website, there's this thing called Looking Back, the strategic plan 08-2013. This was our initial strategic plan. Okay? And there's actually a report here that summarizes, that presents data on every objective and indicator in our initial strategic plan. All of this, the results of the 2008-2013 plan, also informed the development of the current plan. So those were the goals and objectives in our initial plan. And again, you can see for each objective the indicator, our targets at the time, the data source, person responsible, time frame or frequency of monitoring, the baseline, and the final. Remember, our initial strategic plan was 2008-2013. So the last year in that strategic plan was 2012-2013. So you can see the data for each year, and then for each objective, we indicate was this achieved or not. So for E1.1, we achieved it. For E1.2, we made progress, but we did not achieve it. That means that we have to attend to it more in our current strategic plan. Third one, progress. Fourth one, exceeded. Okay? So we did that for each objective, again, in our initial strategic plan, and used those findings from the evaluation and control phase to inform our new strategic plan. Does that make sense? Is everyone following what's happening here? So I'm not making up this stuff. I mean, we really do this stuff. So when you have lots of time and you want to know everything you ever wanted to know about the school that you're in, you can actually look this stuff up online. Perhaps more than you would ever want to know, but it's out there. Okay? Questions?
What is the average time it takes, or how many people are involved in the monitoring? Oh, you had okay, never mind.
Yeah, all of those people who are listed here, everyone monitors whatever indicator is assigned to them. And then we report to each other and to all of our stakeholders twice a year, at the beginning of the fall semester and the beginning of the spring semester. Our dean has very fancy presentations. He takes all of this data and he puts it into nice PowerPoints, and so no one likes to present after him because he makes us all look bad. We provide him with the data. We don't say that. We provide him with the data, he presents it. Yes.
I'm not sure if we can give the answer to this or not because it's kind of related, but so a lot of this stuff is just general targets, some of it is accreditation. Does this also play into like how schools get like ranked in like US News and like things like that?
Yeah.
And so do you guys like look at that specifically to like like those target like what their criteria are to like, you know, move up and stuff or
Sure. Yeah. I mean we're always pushing the envelope, right? So I mean some of it again is expected or required, but then some of it is, you know, when we say, for example, develop a doctoral program in health management and policy. I mean, that's not required. That's a major initiative that we took upon ourselves. But that's again to graduate programs are important. They help bring in research. They help raise our rankings. So yes, certainly. Good question. Other questions? So again, this is the old, and you have there the new as well. Yes.
So in that cycle, the last component is evaluation and control.
Mm-hmm.
Control in what sense? I was thinking it should be like monitoring and evaluation, evaluation, you know. So that control part.
It is, you are exactly right. I mean, control here, it is in the sense of monitoring the progress and controlling, you know, budgets and plans to make sure that they stay on track. So it's more an internal auditing feature in a way. Other questions? No? Okay. So I hope that it has become, you know, clear to everyone that strategic planning is very valuable. It's not just an exercise, you know, that we do because we have to do it as managers. It actually drives everything that we do. It does provide overarching direction and discipline for the organization. Shared learning, I heard earlier about shared knowledge and a shared frame of reference. It does help improve communication and motivate staff to achieve their full potential. But sometimes strategic planning fails. Strategic planning can fail if, again, we're not involving the appropriate people. So if it's only just few people, you know, doing this by themselves, and if it's not a collaborative process, again, that involves the different stakeholders. It can fail if there's no consensus, and if we separate financial and strategic planning. Remember, I said earlier, those objectives, we have to allocate resources to them. People, budgets, they're not gonna take care by themselves. So really our financial planning and budgeting should be aligned with our strategic plans. Those should not be separate processes. Analysis paralysis can hinder strategic plans. I mean, especially when you have large groups of people. If all we do is just analyze the external environment, the internal environment, but we cannot distill this down into a SWOT analysis and then identify our priorities and goals, we can circle for years. So we have to be mindful of that. Strategic planning can fail if we avoid critical issues. So let's say we know we have a shortage of qualified faculty. But we decide, oh, that's too difficult to address. Let's not worry about it now. We'll come to it later. Okay? That's not gonna help anyone. Okay? The issue is not gonna go away if we ignore it. You know, we need to address it and address it directly. Okay? Diversity was an issue for us when, for example, we started our School of Public Health. As a faculty and staff, we were not as diverse as we wanted to be. So we did establish, you know, ambitious targets, and we worked intentionally to increase the diversity of our faculty and staff. assuming objectives will take care of themselves, they won't take care of themselves. People have to move them. And poor communication. Poor communication tends to be the culprit. I really cannot overemphasize how important communication is. Clear and frequent and direct communication. When we're developing our strategic plans again, when we form the planning work groups, we clearly communicate with them the charge of every work group. What we're expecting from them. What are the timelines? When they produce their reports, we share preliminary reports with all of our stakeholders, get input about them, finalize them. We communicate our progress reports annually. So there's really ongoing communication so that everyone feels informed. And again, to wrap up, it's important to remember that those 4 phases of the strategic management cycle do align very nicely with the core functions of public health that were discussed at the beginning of this semester. Okay? Assessment, policy development, and assurance. And you can see the alignment clearly on this slide. So, one more activity for today. This is just an ungraded quiz. So there are 9 items on this quiz. And unlike typical quizzes, you can work with your partner. Indicate if each of those statements is true or false. Who needs more? Here you go.
We need 2 more. Here's the next one.
Everyone got one? Everyone got one? So each of those statements is about strategic planning. Okay? So the it in the statements replace that with strategic planning.
Yeah, like for our essay questions, we had to pick a side. What I do is like, so I take like 4 years back, never hitting on time. I was like literally like within 15 seconds of my time running out. And I did actually on the math section, I ran out of time. I was able to like just guess, but not look at my questions. But I mean, my score is not terrible. So, and they got me, well, I didn't actually, the other thing is we haven't taken like being accelerated because we don't have to do because I was a main score and they forced me to take it. Even though I was like, oh, I don't have to take this. They're like, you have to take it for grad school, even if like you go into your PhD. So it's fine. But they gave us a discount on that. Yeah, it was, I don't know if it's a good thing. They're just so, the tier is just so small.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So it takes accurate
Just like, people are like better They're just like
Okay, so where did we stop when we were doing our second activity? Whose turn is it now? Right here?
Did you speak?
No. Okay, so just like we did with the previous activity, if you can please read the statement and let us know your answer, and we'll go from there.
Okay. The strategic management planning is a technique, not a philosophy. True.
What do you guys have?
True.
So this is perhaps the trickiest one of them all, because it is a technique and a philosophy. There are tools. It's both. So this one actually would be false. It's a technique that has its tools and its phases, right? All of the tools that we discussed, the SWOT analysis, the developing the SMART objectives, the action plans, all of those are tools. But really for an organization to engage in collaborative strategic planning and to invest in the process and to monitor their performance and share that, they really have to have that culture, that philosophy that supports this kind of process. So it's both a technique and a philosophy. Next one.
People at all levels of the organization must take ownership in the process and results. True?
True. This is straightforward, right? We talked about that quite a bit this afternoon. Next, please.
It's about organizational renewal. True.
Okay, thank you.
Is it not false? What? Can you explain that one, please?
Why did you think it was true?
It's a cycle.
Okay, those who think it's true, false, help us understand this. I'm gonna tell you, this one, if this was on an exam, it would not be. A true would be acceptable and false would be acceptable. I told you that a couple like that, but that's how we can, if they're all easy, I mean, we want to have discussion, right? So why would this be true? Why would this be false? Let's talk about it. Yes.
Would it be false if we're doing the analyses, like the evaluation and control? instead of a renewal of it would be just an adjustment rather than changing the whole thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Matthew, because he's dying to speak. and then Faye, and I see a couple more hands. Yeah.
I think it'd be false if you're not changing your mission or core values or vision. Then it's not about any type of renewal.
Faye is next.
I chose true because it's all about evolving. You want to attain new heights, new results. Yeah, more results. So that's why I chose true.
Okay, so it's about evolving. There was one hand right here.
Oh, it's mostly the same as her answer, just that any improvement would be in some sense a renewal.
Okay, sir.
Well, just similar to what they said, but at the end of every strategic plan, there is a new vigor, a new goal. Everything is just new. So you may not change the mission, but something new happens. So I think it's a renewal.
Any other thoughts about this one? Again, this is not one that has necessarily a true or a false answer. It can depend on the circumstances and on how, again, we as stakeholders view this process. Next one.
It is a magic bullet. I chose false.
What do you guys think? Is there such a thing as a magic bullet?
I mean, I have one.
Next one, please. Next one.
Commitment from the top. True.
I can't hear you.
It must have full commitment from the top. True.
So it must have full commitment from the top, though again the engagement has to happen. The top has to have the awareness to engage all levels earlier. Next one.
Rely on consultants as much as possible. I said false.
Who do you want to rely on?
The people that are in the organization and your stakeholders.
Your people at the front lines who are doing the work all day. They know best, right?
Sorry, I just want to ask, for non-profit organizations, almost every time they engage a consultant when they are developing a specific plan. So I don't know if it's the same as relying on them or engaging them. I don't know how to differentiate that.
I think engaging them is fine, but to really, typically, I mean, you don't want your consultants developing your plan by themselves. It's certainly helpful to bring in external expertise, but that cannot substitute for the expertise, again, of your people. Does that make sense? Yeah. Next one.
People learn by doing, so it takes time for them to get it, and I said true.
Okay, thank you. Next.
The process of strategic planning is less important than the outcome.
This is false. Why is that? You got it. You got it. Just help us understand your thinking.
It is circular. Because the planning is also important.
Because the planning is also important, right? Because if we don't have the right process in place, what will happen to the outcomes? They won't happen, right? So having, again, the right process in place at least helps facilitate the achievement of the outcomes. Next.
It will take a long time to do and see results. Is it true?
This is one of those, okay, where yes.
I was gonna say, it depends on how you define long time.
So this depends on lots of factors, right? I mean, for certain indicators, for certain objectives, we might be able to see results quickly. For others, it might take longer. Plus, exactly right, what's time? 1 year or 2 years? Okay, so just few words of wisdom that I borrowed from colleagues and scholars, so I can't take credit for any of these. Interesting paradoxes. The more chaotic the environment, the more strategic planning is needed. Major changes are often easier to make than small changes. So it's okay to be ambitious again and to push the envelope. And the rules of success, while they are typically created outside our organization, it's really up to us to create competitive advantage for our organization by, again, taking advantage of those opportunities and minimizing the threats. And finally, the significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So the very last thing that I want to show you before we leave for the day, I did, share with you our college strategic plan, and I just want to show you one other example of a strategic plan of a public health agency, just again to demonstrate that everything that we talked about today is actually real and happens, in the real world. This is the Florida Department of Health. This is their 2016-2018 strategic plan. So for how many years is this a strategic plan? This is a 3-year strategic plan, 16, 17, 18. Again, we talked earlier about how we're increasingly seeing, 3-year strategic plans. They published it in January 2016, and then they did a mid-course revision in May of 2017. The table of contents, just like any good report, you should always have an executive summary. Dr. Beatty will be asking you to develop an executive summary for your project later this semester. As much as your work is awesome, most people are not going to have time to read your full report. If you're fortunate, they will read your executive summary. Okay? So 1-page executive summary should be a solid abstract of your report. Again, always a strategic plan is going to start by listing the mission, vision, and core values of the organization, because those serve as the foundation of the strategic plan. The strategic priorities or issues, and then they have different appendices: who participated in the strategic planning process, their monitoring summary, so that's phase 4, their SWOT analysis, that's phase 1, their environmental scan, phase 1. Okay. So this is their executive summary here, 1 page. Their mission, why do we exist? Again, our purpose. Their vision, what do we want to achieve? We looked at their vision earlier today when we were looking at visions and missions, to be the healthiest state in the nation. And then they have 5 core values. Their strategic priorities, as you can see, are in red: health equity, long healthy life, readiness for emerging threats, effective agency processes, regulatory efficiency. So 5 strategic priorities for their current strategic planning cycle. For each strategic priority, as you can see, they have at least one goal listed right under that strategic priority. But for each goal, they have multiple SMART objectives that are specific, measurable, and timed. Okay? Strategic priority, goals, objectives. And then here in their action plan, they define who is responsible for each objective. It can be the Division of Community Health Promotion, or their Office of Minority Health, or their Division of Public Health Statistics, depending on what that objective is. Okay. So they go through them, every strategic priority, goals, objectives. What is missing from here? What do you see so far that is missing from their strategic plan? Based on what we discussed today. This is everyone who participated in developing the plan. This is their process that they followed. So you can see they did a SWOT analysis. They had multiple meetings. This is how they're going to monitor things. So that's their monitoring cycle, phase 4. Those are their actual strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that they identified in their SWOT analysis. Is there something missing? So this is their action plan or their work plan. That's phase 3, the objective, who it's assigned to, and the source of data. What's missing?
Situational assessment.
Situational assessment, I guess they did talk about their SWOT analysis and all of that earlier. But in their action plan, they have the goals, they have the objectives. The resources. Exactly. So there's really no mention of the resources that will be allocated to achieve those objectives. Okay. So you can, Google different organizations and again look at their strategic plans and compare them to each other. But I just wanted again to share with you an example from the public health sector. Any final thoughts, comments, or questions for me for today? Now my email is just my last name, kouri@etsu.edu. I live 2 floors below here, next to, she had the courage of having her office next to mine.
It has 2 windows though.
So if you have questions after, you've had the chance to think about all of this, send me an email or stop by my office downstairs or save them for next week, whichever you prefer. Okay? Okay, thank you all for your attention. I really enjoyed meeting you and enjoyed your input and thoughts today. Thank you.
Don't leave just yet. I know you guys are so ready because it's pretty outside. So, per your request, you wanted to see what topics are already taken, and this is always fascinating. And if this course was not in its last iteration, I would probably do it a little bit different because you all picked one So I've gotten 5 of the 9 groups have submitted something already. You're not late because they're not due till the 23rd. So don't freak out if you're not on here. I have 2 teen pregnancy and 3 opioid related. That's what we have, folks. So, Dr. Corey and Sylvester and I were talking about how fascinating this is, because just like the rest of America and our policymakers and our leaders, you guys gravitate to hot topics, right? What is hot right now? Teen pregnancy and opioids, right? But remember week 1 when we looked at the top leading causes of death? What were the top 2? Cancer, right? Those are not sexy anymore. Nobody chose those. So I'm gonna ask, just for our own enjoyment and for your learning, that we don't have another 3 opioids and 2 teen pregnancy. I know one group was interested in postpartum depression. Is that still, what group is that? Do you know your name?
3.
Yes, you guys are group 3. So that is not taken. We have group 5 wants to do NAS in postpartum maternal care in Washington, Unicoi, and Carter counties. So that group I said yes to. Group 8, I told you guys, NAS, let's pick a different opioid topic. But now I'm getting to group 9 who also wants to do opioids. So maybe let's think between group 8 and 9, either you're gonna work together or we can kind of brainstorm something other than opioids. I mean, there's a lot of public health issues out in the world. Don't feel bad, online students. 4 obesity projects, no obesity on ground, and 3 opioid related ones. So it's not just you guys. So if I haven't talked to you guys yet, feel free to come up afterwards, stay back, talk to your groups a little bit. But we might be having to switch these out a little so that we learn more about different topics, right? Okay, that's all I have. Dr. Corey looks like he wants to say something.
It doesn't really mean anything, but I think one group should do like anxiety and suicide among college students.
Because that is actually a hot topic, and Dr. Corey has a daughter in college, so I'm sure it's on top of her mind. But when is the suicide month? What month is that? National Suicide. You'll see a lot of flags out on the campus, and it's a really major issue on college campuses. Was that last month, August? I don't leave this building. Okay, that's all I have for you guys. September, this month is.
They already had suicide prevention week last week.
So yeah. Well, thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Actually, like for the first time now, I'm just talking about it.